हे गाइस, स्वागत है आप सबका मेरे चैनल सुनो कहानी पे। वेयर वी वर रीडिंग अ शिमला अफेयर बाय सृष्टि चौधरी। एंड मेरे चैनल पे और भी अदर्स बुक हैं जो कि आप जाके ट्राई कर सकते हो। बहुत अच्छी अच्छी बुक है और टॉप रिकमेंडेड बुक है। सो हम पढ़ रहे थे शिमला अफेयर। 12 चैप्टर तक हमने पढ़ लिया है। 13 चैप्टर से शुरू करना है। सो लेट्स स्टार्ट। आई सॉ अ वाइट Rolls Royce pull up a little way down, where the road ended and the dirt road began, followed by the 6 members guard on horseback. In Simla, only 3 people were allowed to have and use the car within the city premises: the Viceroy, the Commander-in-Chief Lord Ripon, and the Governor of Punjab, Lord Fraser. The road leading right up to the hotel had never been built, so after a point on the hill, the car had to be abandoned. One of the guards climbed down from the horse to open the door, and Lord Fraser stepped out. A chase followed the guard. The Fraser tread inside gingerly, after which another carriage and a guard on horseback trailed the processions up to the hotel. Once they arrived at the hotel, an Indian political too descended from the carriage, standing in contrast with Fraser. Fraser was dressed sharply in his uniform and stiff-hat, his bandage pinned up in a pride, his shoes smartly polished. His stature was imposing, for he was tall and had a rather huge belly, but underneath one could see that he had a weakness for the finer things in life. The Indian had khadi wrapped around himself, as most Congress members tended to, and wore wooden mules, his back slightly stopped. He seemed old, but Noor had told me that crowds of up to 10,000 came out to hear him any time he wanted to speak. My sisters and I stood in front of the gates. We first courtesied the Lord Fraser, and then I folded our hands in greeting, bowing our heads. It was a bright sunny day, and we had arranged tea for them in the garden. See, Deodar, Fraser said, addressing the other man but beaming at us. How it is in Simla. Indian women running a hotel for English guests. Ah, whole mix. Brother and friends in arms is who we are. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir, Afrin said. Everything is ready. Please follow me. Noor and I stood rooted to the spot until Afrin and the man disappeared and then bushed ourselves arranging tea and refreshment for Fraser's staff. Noor said that the Fraser wanted to convince Dida to encourage more Indian men to join the British troop in Europe. That hard time were coming. It was an ironic location for the agenda of the meeting. Hard times are indeed coming, Noor said, handing me to a tray to carry down to the car on my own. The breeze hit my face as I walked down the hill through the forest. The air smelled of the pine and horsewood. The car was still parked, and the man who drove it sat inside. An Indian. He was dressed impeccably in his driver's suit, a turban around his head. He seemed to have not noticed me approaching, as when I reached closer, I appeared to have caught him in a particularly vulnerable moment. He had on a head which was likely Fraser's and was miming and playing the role of the car's owner, holding his head up and barking orders at invisible servants next to him. I was quite amused by his performance, for I thought it quite authentic. At some point, he noticed me and lost character immediately, getting out of the car, flustered, bowing his head. I'm sorry, Saiba. I am so ashamed. Please forgive me, he said, his head hanging in shame. I could see he was young, barely 20, and he had very handsome features. He obviously assumed that I would consider it offensive that he dared to don the hat of his employer even in private. Brother, I said, stepping forward, there is no need to ask for my forgiveness. You did nothing wrong. If I had to drive a car so beautifully, I too would like to sometimes feel that it belonged to me. The car shone in the brightness of the day, and as he still seemed mortified at having been discovered, I talked to him a bit more, handing him the tray of his food as he thanked me profusely. So, you are the driver of the government. Do you find it easy to drive around the city? It's not easy. One would think that if yours is the only car on the roads, it would be easier, but that's not the case. There are always people crowding around the car to see it up close, and occasionally I drive for the viceroys too. He added with some pride. I nodded, and perhaps you and the other drivers had to have some training. For months, me and my 5 more, they taught us to how to drive. There are 2 drivers for each car, and we have to be ready at all times to drive. It's an important job, for we take them around everywhere they need to be. Yes, of course, brother, I agreed. He suddenly broke into what seemed to be chuckle. In fact, that's why I have to drive the vices around a few times. I didn't understand him because the vices did not want his wife knowing where he was going, he said by way of explanation, looking self important. She can question his drivers, but me, she never knows when I drive him. And why does he want to hide where he is going from his wife? There is only one reason a man wants to hide where he is going from his wife. Isn't there, Saiba? He seemed rather proud to have shocked me as the realization of what he was trying to point out dawned on me. Was he perhaps hinting that the Viceroy was adulterous? I could not believe it on him. Yet, why wouldn't the Viceroy indulge in an affair if the rest of Simla did? Charles had said that British crowd had enjoyed their dalliances. The Viceroy was not any more noble or gallant than the rest of them. My mind raced ahead of me. Did Charles too perhaps look around for a moment to involve himself with? No, I pulled myself out from that train of thoughts. Are you quite sure of what you say, brother? I asked. You called me brother. Would I ever be like? But but it's just a talk between you and me, Saiba. For me, this job is everything. Of course, I rushed to assure him. Worry not, I will keep your secret. I am just a curious. Who is this woman? He put up his hands. This I could not tell you. No, it has been a well kept secret. I just know that when I am invited to drive him, that's where he is going. But it's never to be the same place. No one can know anything. To believe him was too tempting. Perhaps it would be more prudent to take information such as this with a hint of salt. Townsman gossip more than anything, but he was the driver driving these cars after all. If anyone knew it, it would be him. I stared at him, trying to read him. Are not you supposed to be discreet about these kinds of matters, brother? This time he looked straight into my eyes, one corner of his lips folding into a smirk. It's amazing how a little knowledge can alter your perception so much. He no longer appeared vulnerable and embarrassed, but instead seemed smarter and much more in the know of things that I could ever imagine him being. One should be discreet, Saiba, but Simla is calling. Can you hear it? If the Viceroy was having an affair with someone, it was in our interest to find out more about it. We debated sharing the driver's information with the Guruji, but ultimately decided to find out the truth on our own. We had already agreed to help us to Simla's circle, but if we had something to twist the Viceroy's arm, we might have another way to retain our hotel. After all, if we knew for sure he is having an affair, would he still be so daring as to take the hotel away from us? I wondered how the Viceroy and his mistress managed to hide it with all the people that he was constantly surrounded with. It was so hard. It was hard to keep a secret in a place like Silma, filled with gossip and eva- vast droppers, especially with someone like Begum Jan around. The next chance we got, Noor and I went to the police station. If there was anyone in the city who would knew the vice's mistress, it would be Begum Jan. Noor had recently been informed that following the protest at the hotel, the police had found Begum Jan. Fortunately, as her former employees, we were allowed to see her. She sat on the floor of the room, her arms crossed around her legs, her burqa wrapped around herself, her customary kajal missing. There was two other women with her at the back of the cell, apparently asleep. She gave a wiry smile upon seeing us, this time seeming much more bogged down by the weight of the world. Are you being locked after? Well, Begum Jan Nur asked. She threw back her head and laughed, and then turned to the side, spitting on the ground. I am sorry that you are here, I said. But last I remember you said that it was an honor to go to jail. In response, she spat again. You didn't have very good things to say about me, Nalini Bibi. Don't think I don't know about your conversation with Singhji. That made Noor mad. You accuse us. You took advantage of our goodwill and stabbed us in the back. You brought us all those people in right to our hotel when you knew the Sahibs would be there. We gave you a job. We settled you, and you betrayed us so easily. Begum Jan came closer to the bars and snapped. There is nothing easy uh, about putting your life on the line, risking the worth of those people who hold the guns, especially as a woman. Do you know what they did to the other protesters, making them crawl through the street, flogging them? You think that's easy? No, but we have to go to do it. Some rights you have to fight for to be free, as Allah originally made us. I looked at Noor, who appeared unfazed. Well, mistakes were made on the both sides, I suppose. Let me do us all a favor and get to the point. You know everything that's happening in the city. You have many friends, both over and underground, listening, observing, and reporting back to you. You are a leader of the Muslim in Simla, and we know that you care about the town, its people, and what happens here. I ask you to help us in the specific matter because it's important to us. Help us just as we have always helped you. If Begum Jan did not say anything, Anur looked at me. Continue. The viceroy is having an affair with someone in the city. We want to know with whom. Begum Jan betrayed no signs of shock or familiarity about what he had just said. She didn't even blink. We waited for a minute, but when she refused to react, I asked impatiently, do you know? Begum Jan said, of course. I looked at Noor. Sure that Begum Jan was not lying. She knew everything. So why would this be an exception? Well, who is it? Why do you want to know? We need a favor from the viceroys. They want to take the hotel away from us. If we were to accidentally know this key information, it would make him think about it again. Be- Begum Jan expressions was pleased again. All right, I can tell you, it's surprising you only came to know of it now, for it's been going on for months. Who is it? Noor asked urgently. Not so fast, Begum Jan said, putting her hand up. You want to find out? You are free. You free me from here, and only then I will tell you what you need to know. And how do we know that you actually have this information? The fortunate thing about you three sisters is that you have been spared so far from the humiliation that women fallen from the grace experience. This woman either perish or sign. Perhaps I was one of the few who were destined to sign. When I was on the street without a father or a husband to protect me, knowledge became my power. A drunk sick spy used to come looking for me every night, knowing that in the darkness of the night and the absence of family, I was fair game. I spent many nights with my heart thumping, hiding in the city's tunnel. One day, an ayah who used to work for the constable and told me the sick would stare at the constable's spy from outside her window. When the information reached the constable, I wondered how. The spy was told to leave Simla within 24 hours, but he spent 5 of those hours telling the town that he had to leave because he dared to mess with me. The business of cigarette is exclusively run by Begum Jan in Simla. Noor leant onto the bars. But how do we know that you have this information? Because I know the mysteries, Noor Bibi. I sell her some of the handicrafts that now lie abandoned at your Oriental Bazaar. She prefers to have the shop straight at home, very spoiled lately. I looked at Noor, feeling stupid for not expecting Begum Jan to want a favor in return. But how in the world could we request Begum Jan's release after I had come in here and complained about her in the first place? Chapter 14. With slightly trembling fingers, I sealed the envelope and gave it to the runner before I could change my mind. I am sorry to bother you, Charles. I had written, but we are in slight of crisis, and I was hoping you could help me. I would not have asked you if it was not urgent. The borders in and out of Simla are sealed, as I am sure you are aware. Any carts and wagons that need to enter the town are stuck in long queues to be thoroughly checked by the border patrol. The backlog is causing massive delays, sometimes for days. We have an urgent delivery for of very high quality produce stuck in the queue. There is a fresh produce coming directly from the Bombay port, cheese, meat, fruits. It's so hard to get hold of fresh ingredients due to the war, and we have paid a lot of money for it. If you could come to the border today on the Hindustan Tibet Road, perhaps you can help us get ahead in the queue. You can thoroughly check the wagons if you are able to. I will meet you there at 3. I had already dug my grave deep enough to be unable to get out without completely wrecking Charles' faith, damaging the trust he so innocently placed in me. I could only hope that he turned up. I was banking on the hope that Charles would not bother checking our wagons. There will be almost 50 kilograms of ammunition in those wagons. We need to get it into town from the caves. It's impossible to get it through the city borders with the security they implemented after the train has hissed, Guruji had told us. Guruji, forgive me, but it still sounds very dangerous, Ratan Babu said. The British have been on the hunt for the stolen ammunition. They are checking every wagon and cart and every person that goes in and out through the borders. Moreover, I heard that somebody important is about to visit, so they have increased security in town and the border even more. Guruji put up his hand. Ratan Babu, the fight for the freedom is full of danger. I do not deny it. This is where our courage must bloom, and we must decide what we are willing to do. Our men in the Bhagat Fauj need more ammunition to defend the Simla circle from the attack after we kill the viceroys. We must conceal the ammunition by spreading it across 2 or 3 wagons and make sure the wagons are not checked thoroughly. It is only our chance. And what if they do find it? I asked. They can't. That's it. There is no other option. Nalani, you must make sure that they don't bring in Nyler and make sure that he lets out our wagon pass. He trusts you. This cannot fail. You know the risk. I knew the risk, but it had never felt so real as it did now. I found myself eager and anxious to be up to that task. It felt like I must perform and act my role, and pressure excited me. My stomach twisted in nervousness at the thought of standing in front of all the guards, waiting to get the wagon checked as if I was 8 years old all over again, trying to hide my unfinished homework from our governess, hoping that I would somehow get lucky and she would not call me out. It made me feel like I was on the center of the stage, a huge spotlight, 1,000 people calling my name. The present was so real, so urgent that anything else played in comparison. When the time arrived, determination seized me, and I was bent on cheering the system cheating the system, ready to sneak the ammunition through the boundaries right under the guards' noses. It was uncannily hot for Simla, and I felt sweat soak through my cotton sari as I placed up the dusty road. My stomach was twisted in knots, but I was eager to prove what I was capable of. When Charles arrived, he gave me a smile that made my heart skip a little. The border guards greeted him with full attention and turned to me curiously. I smiled at Charles and then at the guards. "How are you?" Charles asked, and listening to him made me as breathless and stupid as ever. His voice was full of warmth, care, and laughter. Just hearing him talk made me want to jump up and fling my arms around him. Even in this numbing heat and dressed in his heavy uniform, his smile was wide and ready to take on the world. I realized I was staring at him, speechless for a few seconds, so I turned my head to the wagons, trying to sound slightly irritated and worried. "Charles, I am sorry to ask you for this favor, but look at the quiz. Ever since the riots, and I heard some important delegation is to arrive from London. The security is very tight." He held up his hands. "Don't even mention it. I'll do a quick check on my own, and then you will be free to go." I nodded at him in gratitude. "Oh, Charles." On Charles' cue, a guard moving to bring our wagon to the quay and to the barricades. Another worry struck me. Charles was not stupid. In fact, he was cleverer than most. Perhaps the guards could have still been fooled, pressured as they were to process the long queue. But Charles, I turned to him, hoping to engage him in talk that would distract him. "How are things looking with the war going?" The thought of the war always ran like poison through my skin. Why should we Indians be embroidered in a European war? Yet Charles had nothing to do with it. He must be worried about his home, his family, his town. Charles shook his head. The very mention of the war is stressing him out. "We have felt better even since the Churchill came out, but now that Paris has fallen," he didn't need to finish the sentence for me. "And your family?" "My brother Rob, he has called up for some service some days ago. He is just 20, rather well behaved, and so innocent. He was so proud to go. He wanted to follow my example, you know." I heard the pain in his voice and felt it in my being. I wanted to reach out to him and tell him that I know what it's like to fear for a sibling, the ones we loved so fiercely, the one we would protect. For that second, I looked into his eyes. I forgot my own terror at being caught, but then a voice called out, "Sir," and I knew the moment of reckoning was here. The wagons had arrived, and Charles smiled at me before walking over. A turbaned guard opened the doors from the back to reveal the large cloth covering the delivery of food. Charles pulled the seat off, and underneath shone golden mandarins, peaches, and berries, all stuck in bundles. He nodded and covered everything back up. Moving to the next wagon, I followed him, my mind racked with suspense. The inside of this wagon smelled a lot more pungent, and once the cloth was taken off, it revealed boxes full of cheese, some fresh meat, and sacks of flour. Charles took a Corsi looked inside and turned around to smile at me again. "Sorry, it's just a protocol these days." I shook my head and swelled the waves of guilt that threatened to come up. Finally, he popped his head in the third wagon, taking off the cloth. I just stepped back, breathing in relief when Charles started to shake the wagon from its side. "This seems rather heavy," he said to me. "No one in the particular. I think it's stuck in something." I looked around in alarm. Charles had realized that the wagon weighed much more than the food they appeared to carry. He shook it once again, and my heart jumped to my mouth. If he probed further, he would easily discover that the wagons had ammunition. I began shaking in terror. I looked around in desperation. From where I stood, I could see the cracks in baseboards under which lay the guns and the ammunition if I wanted to live to see another day. I had to stop Charles fast, otherwise he would get the wagons stripped down. He had now started to rummage through the food. It was only a matter of time before he discovered the space beneath the baseboard. There were only seconds to act, and I made up my mind. With a heave, I collapsed, grazing the side of his body with mine so he would turn around to see me. To see. With a rather dramatic thud, I fell on the ground and closed my eyes, praying to the Lord that it would work. I heard Charles call out my name in panic and knew that I had taken his attention away from the wagon. Felt him sit down next to me on the ground, taking my head in his arms. For a moment, I did feel faint because, nestled in his arms, it was the most relaxed I had felt in those days. He softly held my face by the chin, trying to shake my awake, but I knew I had to keep the act on a bit longer, even though it made me sad to cause him worry. With my artificial tactics, he called out my name with concern, moving my head gently, trying to nudge me back into conscience, and it touched me that he seemed to care that much. "Nalini, wake up! What's wrong with her?" "Nalini!" His voice rang in my ear, and the kindness in it almost made me tell him that there was nothing wrong with me. When I heard other people gather around us and Here Charles called out for some water. I knew I could not keep up the act much longer. Hopefully he was sufficiently distracted from the wagon by now. I opened my eyes slowly and blinked a few times. The face floating above me felt disorienting for a moment. Charles was asking me if I was fine, and I nodded lightly, trying to get up, but he pushed me back into his arms. I could hardly complain about that. He yelled for a chair to be brought to me, and I put my hand up to my forehead. Nalani, are you all right? Guilt made me certain that I was absolutely fine, but he did not let go of me. I closed my eyes. I knew this would be the only memory I would ever have of being so close to him. It must be that heat, I said weakly. He smiled, looking even more handsome from this new angle, his face directly above mine. Well, it's good thing you are from India then, huh? Where it's not hot at all. I gave a small laugh, and then a wet cloth was placed on top of my forehead. Charles held me up and put me in the chair. Feeling better now, he asked me, and I nodded, suddenly remembering why I had pretended to collapse. I tried to interrupt Charles as he turned to guard Nerdy, but I was unsuccessful. Check this wagon properly. I think it's stuck in something, he said to the turbaned guard before turning back to me. I shivered up in fear again. My face must have lost all its color in my panic because I heard Charles saying that I was not looking good. Should be maybe call for the doctor. I heard him asking the others, but I could barely pay attention. Instead, I was staring at the turbaned guard who was shifting the food in one corner of the wagon, hoping he would miss the gap in the baseboard. Don't worry, Charles said. Nothing the direction of my cage. We are checking everything that goes in and out. Shimla these days, many times smugglers use others' cars to sneak in illegal items, so it's best to have your wagon checked thoroughly. I barely managed to not seeing the guard take one of the gap in the baseboards. He thrust his hands inside, and I knew it was over for me as he felt around the ammunition that lay underneath. I hung my head, unable to look at Charles anymore. I saw the guards peer deeper inside the wagon and then turn around to look at me. Game over, his face seemed to say. His eyes caught mine, and I saw the slightest twitch of his eyebrows. Why did he keep on staring at me? Why didn't he immediately announce the concealed ammunition? I glanced at Charles, who was obviously to all that had passed between me and the guard. All clear, sir, the guard called out, and I almost exclaimed in surprise. Charles smiled, not noticing the guard is still staring at me. I knew that he had seen the ammunition, but then why hadn't he informed Charles? Let's get you home, Nalini. Why don't you come by the Cecil Hotel tomorrow evening? I want to introduce you to a special guest. My ears stood up. Could Charles possibly mean the mysterious visitor of whom all the Simla was closed? I nodded, still feeling the eyes of the turban guard at the back of my head. Why had he let me go? Afri and Ratan Babu did not believe me when I told them about the guard. You must have not seen it correctly, Ratan Babu said. This guard obviously did not check properly and thankfully missed out on noticing the ammunition under the baseboard. We got very lucky. I shook my head, but there was no logic to support my position. I know what I saw. He looked told me that he knew what was inside, but when then they asked me what would be his motivation to let me go, I was at loss. The more I dwelled on the topic, the more dissatisfied I was. With rich teak wood flowers, glowing fireplace, a grander ballroom, and a more central location, the Cecil often beat the Royal Hotel Simla as the most beautiful and lively hotel in Simla. The competition and resentment worked on both ends. We strongly suspect that they once sent a flock of monkeys on our grounds to dispute our guests. Once the British shut down our hotel, the Cecil would finally have what it wanted all along. It was strange to walk into a hotel and not be familiar with every nook and cranny. The staff at the entrance turned up their noses at the sight of me. Perhaps they recognized me, or perhaps it was because I was not white, but I was excited to see Charles. I was cherished the memory of his arms, the sound of his voice calling out my name rang again and again in my head, even though my actions were inauthentic, my feelings for him were not. I wanted to show myself as elegant and dignified again as he had seen me last, covered in sweat and dirt. I had dressed in a beautiful floral sari, appeared utter and cold, tamed my lips, and placed flowers in my braid. I hoped Charles would be taken in by my appearance. What chance do British women have in front of our elaborate saris, luminous hair, and dark eyes? Noor often said. Soft piano music played in the ballroom as I entered and immediately attracted curious, disdainful looks and strained artificial smiles. I searched for Charles in a sea of black ties and evening dresses. The war might have been ravaging Europe, but it could not be farther from Simla season. Charles and I both found each other at the same time, walking closer as though we were mirror image. Everybody else in the room felt inconceivable consequently, as we came nearer in the breathtaking moment. Good evening, Charles. I have decided to change my mind, he said. About what? About Judy Garland being Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. It should be you, actually. You are the perfect Dorothy, he said, and I had to laugh. As I looked down and realized that the heels I had borrowed from Noor were red, he gave me his arms and I took it, following him without question. We might not have any prospects, but that did not make the present with him any less thrilling. That was until I came face to face with woman Charles had led us to. She had full lips, bright eyes, and wispy curly hair that she had dressed with a stylish head. Her complexion was rosy yet clear skinned. She was curvy in the right place and confidently wore a sparkly low cut dress, a glass of champagne in one hand, and a light cigarette in the other. All my earlier confidence about being beautiful vanished. It felt small, awkward, and traditional beside this stylish woman who, despite appearing rich and fashionable, gave me a wide smile without the usual patronizing look. Nalini, this is Eliza May. Charles introduced her. She had just arrived from England 2 days ago. The way she stood next to him, comfortable and charmatic, I knew it was all over. It's very nice to meet you, she said, blinking and smiling, and I could not tell whether she meant it or not. Perhaps she was trying to gauge how much respect occurred to me. Perhaps she was confused about why I was here at the Cecil. So, what brings you to Simla? I asked her, fighting to keep my tone polite. Eliza gave Charles a momentary glance, and its meaning was clear. Like the other British women who arrived in Simla, she too was in search of husband, adventure. She replied with a giggle, and trade, honestly. There is a big demand back in England for Indian handicrafts, and like a modern woman, I have decided to try my hand at making my fortune. Charles smiled at her, and I felt betrayed. He was already dazed by this thrill seeking English woman who dared sail to India and dreamed of making a fortune. Perhaps all our sad moments, all that he had written and said to me, had never been as special for him as they had been for me. Or maybe he had realized that I was unsuitable for him, and when weary of my appeal had disappeared from his eyes. So, is Eliza the special guest for whom the Simla borders are closed? I asked with a forced smile. I was not stupid. Of course, I knew she was not the guest. I was fishing for the identify of the real visitor. Oh no, Charles said. She is absolutely a special guest, but the city did not set for her. Actually, even I don't know who this person coming from England is and why he will be here. It's to be top secret meeting. It was strange that he did not know and disappointing that he could not tell me more, but I was more annoyed by the fact that he called Eliza special. Nalani, I wanted to ask you, Charles said. Could you help Eliza a bit? Maybe take her to the lower bazaar and meet some artisans, help her with the language. She is still very new, so it would be stressful for her to go there alone for the first time. Didn't you know introduce me this woman at the hotel at your Oriental Bazaar? Does she make the crafts on her own? I can't for the life of me remember her name. I was about to rebuke Charles for putting me in this position. Why should I help this future wife makes money by exploiting artisans in Simla? Of course, I could not help her. Charles was free to have any sort of relationship with Eliza, but I would not be part of their artificial love story. But then something struck me. Are you talking about Begum Jan? I asked him. Yes. She is the one. Doesn't she make the best handicraft in Simla? That's what you had said, and I trust your opinion. So I assumed you would be able, able to get Eliza to her. Oh, wonderful. Eliza clapped her hands. I would love to meet her and discuss some trade. See what she makes and how fast she can supply. I stared at them. It's true she is the bed, but she is rather preoccupied for the moment. It's horrible they put her in prison just for some petty reason. But Charles, if you can put it in a word, I think it would be really help the poor woman and Eliza at the same time. I'll see what I can do, Charles said in a thoughtful tone. I smiled at Eliza and she smiled at Charles. This might be the end of our romance, but the battle for India was just beginning. Chapter 15. A cute, picturesque cottage perched on the path leading up to Prospect Hill lived by Lady Sinclair with her 9 servants, a brother who divided his time between Lucknow and Simla, and 2 dogs. I presume she was not very young, but she looked radiant anyway, her blonde curls done up in the latest fashion, her summer frock flapping around her knees, and the hat on her head tipping at an appropriate angle to the right. She, Begum Jan claimed, was the mistress of the Viceroys, a secret known only to 5 other people in town and maybe in all the world. On the urging of Eliza May to Charles, Begum Jan was released, and in return, as promised, Eliza would be shown Begum Jan's best handicrafts. It was decided that I would accompany Eliza during one of Begum Jan's regular visits to Lady Sinclair cottage. I was hesitant to go and play the guide, but Begum Jan's declaration of a Lady Sinclair's sordid personal matters erased my reluctance, and even offering came along to the cottage. As much as I wanted nothing to do with Eliza, I had to swallow my bitterness and feigned interest at the little jewelry boxes and napkin holders that Begum Jan presented that Eliza would surely buy with very little money and sell for an obscene number of pounds back in England. For a widow who had no position in society except her brother's appointment in Lucknow, Lady Sinclair lived rather well. One of the servants fanned her constantly while the other brought us lemonade and waited on us. Nalini, Eliza said grossly, mispronouncing my name. Mispronouncing my name, although she had said it fine when Charles had been there. Could you make sure we get a fair price? I smiled sweetly at her. Of course, I would make sure she gets a fair price. A price that was fair to Begum Jan. Eliza and Lady Sinclair kept picking up the handicrafts with their dainty fingers, throwing them on the side if they didn't take any fancy to them, keeping them near themselves if they did. Eliza also kept telling us all how important it was that she order enough handicrafts to be able to make good a profit of them, but also not too much. She wanted to retain the handmade quality about them, making them appear one of a kind and hard to come by. Afreen nudged me when another servant girl appeared and stood near us, preparing a roll of tobacco for Lady Sinclair. The girl kept her head down, covered as it were by the edge of her sari. I caught a whiff of hashish and looked meaningfully at a friend who too had not missed it. So that's what Lady Sinclair was smoking. Perhaps even with the viceroys, Beckham Jan from her squatting position could not stop staring at the servant girl, barely able to keep her mouth closed. Is there a problem? Lady Sinclair asked. And Begum Jan shook her head quickly. Elijah appeared quite shocked at Lady Sinclair's brazen smoking of hashish and turned to us instead, prattling about her future trade. Was Charles already in love with her? I could not deny that she was beautiful, and with her talk of building her business, she seemed to harbor ambitions. He would be happy with her, I told myself, and thought settled like a stone at the pit of my stomach. We hope you can make it to our ball, Lady Sinclair Afrin said. We would be ever so honored. It is one of our Simla's most exciting events, and it would be lovely if you could be there. If our problem was the vices, then perhaps the key to that problem was Lady Sinclair. How could this key to be turned? Was it just an affair, or were they in love? Would he move mountains for her? Would he die for her? Lady Sinclair tried to act like she was above Afrin's entreaties. However, my guess was that she could not bear to see Viserys attending the ball with his wife. We were giving her a bet. Stand next to the Viserys and dance in the arms of another man. Let jealous burn him. If she loved him, she would take it. And sure enough, she nodded uncaringly. Perhaps I could pass by. Mind you, I prefer a quiet evening with a glass of wine. Afrin turned to me thrilled, and I too had to stop myself from smiling too much in case we gave the game away. We finally packed up and began walking with Begum Jan, Elijah having gone off in her carriage. Why do you look so more so, Begum Jan? Afrin asked her. Didn't I make enough profit? Begum Jan barely seemed to have heard us, and was instead staring at Lady Sinclair's cottage from the outside as if it had personally criticized her handicrafts. The servant girl, she muttered. What? The servant girl, Begum Jan yelled with just a touch of madness, taking me aback. What about her? She is the girl who was abducted before the riots by the Muslim man. I stood still in confusion, whereas Afrin seemed to have understood something. She stepped forward and held Begum Jan by the shoulder, staring at her squarely in the eyes. That cannot be, I said, recalling Lord Beeson specifically telling me that the girl had been returned. Are you quite positive it was her? Afrin asked. Begum Jan looked at the both of us and nodded, confused lit in her eyes. Afrin looked around for a moment and then grabbed Begum Jan's hand. She headed to the other side of the hill, presumably towards the rear of Lady Sinclair garden. Afrin, look here, where are you going? I called out to her in alarm but in vain, as Afrin continued to march forward with purpose. We must find out what this girl is doing here. The riots happened because she was abducted. So what is she doing here rolling horses for a vice's mistress? We hid behind a tree for quarters of an hour as we waited for Lady Sinclair's servant girl to appear at the door or out in the garden. I was just about to say that we were indulging in a spectral waste of time when the girl appeared again, and on reflex, Begum Jan whistled. The girl looked around, confused about where the sound came from. She was about to turn away when Begum Jan whistled again and gave a short clap. Now the girl looked towards us, and Begum Jan peeked out from behind the tree, gesturing at her to come forward. The girl looked around to make sure nobody noticed the exchange and walked to us gingerly, asking us what was wrong. When she was close enough, Begum Jan grabbed her arm and pulled her behind the big tree we were hiding behind. Before the girl could ask any question, Begum Jan, to our shock, gave her a rough slap, the sound of which sent my ears ringing. The girl gasped and collapsed on the ground, too stupefied to even Look up or more. What are you doing? Afrin whispered furiously, trying to pull Begum Jan away, but the woman suddenly went wild. She started slapping whatever parts of the girl that she could access. You witch whore! What have you done? You are here while the whole town kills each other in your search. What are you doing here? Tell me. The girl started crying. She tried to crawl away and escape, and it took all my strength to make her stay where she was as Afrin tried to hold back Begum Jan. Afrin finally managed to give Begum Jan a strong shove, pushing her to the ground. The two of us now stand between Begum Jan and the girl. Tell us, Begum Jan spat, commanding the girl even from her fallen position. We both sat down as well, and I prayed she would start talking before Lady Sinclair noticed her missing. I didn't know what was going on, the girl said tearfully. I swear on all that I hold her. I had just gone to the next village with Iqbal. Who is Iqbal? I asked. Not is, was, she replied, breaking into a fresh round of tears, drying them with the edge of her sari. We were neighbors growing up, and he was always like a brother to me. Even though our families tried to stop us, we did everything together, even when his family had to move to the Mohammedan part of a town. Then what happened? Begum Jan asked sharply. I wish that she would tone down her menace. The poor girl was in such distress. My brother told us to go and deliver some post to Kalka, and we were off. When it was time to come back, we heard there were riots going on in Simla, and for 2 days we stayed hidden in a Kalka. We saw them there too. Those men with the torches and swords. How were we to know the riots were happening because of us? We stayed hidden because we didn't want to be caught in the maramari. All I know is at some point a bunch of men came and separated us. As soon as they did, I knew something bad was going to happen. I heard Iqbal apologizing, scream, and I knew he was. She broke into fresh sob. Begum Jan appeared grim. He was killed. He died because of me, she wept. But I don't understand what I did. I just looked him along to Kalka. Afterwards, they locked me up in a room. And at some point, somebody came and said, a servant was needed here. My family says, here, I will be safe. The Muslim will be murder me if they find out I'm alive and that the Iqbal died because of me. They even told me not to talk to anyone else, so I should not be telling you this. What's your name? Afri asked her. Bina. It appeared that Bina was telling the truth. I doubted that she knew much more than what she had told us, yet it defied logic. If Bina had just been sent away to deliver post in Kalka, why did the townspeople, Royals, thinking that she had been kidnapped by the Muslims? Who spread the lie? Why didn't her family try to clear the air? Who else knew about this? Begum Jan asked. Oh, my family. Only my family and the man who found me and Iqbal. I don't know who they are, but they must be formal Simla. Otherwise, why would they know do that to us? But who brought you here? I don't know, she said tearfully. Some man from the town, but they were very strict and told me to stay here. We let Vina go back inside and walked for a while in a silence, each trying to figure out the pattern of events. It was on the back of this girl's addiction that so many died in the riots, that Ratan's mother died, Afrin said. Yet it's clear that none of it was about her. These riots did not just happen. They were obviously orchestrated. Some people out there want to Hindus and Muslims murdering each other. Some people who see a benefit in this strife. I thought of a man I had seen that evening, the one who had been putting up the hateful posters. But who and why? Your guess is as good as mine. But something sinister is going on in this town for sure, and I don't think it will spare us for too long. Begum Jan turned towards us, thoughtful and morose. Maybe I will have to return and look for this man. Nalini baby, there is a secret meeting next week in Simla for the mysterious guest they have brought to town. I have absolutely no idea what it is about. All I know is that the man they are meeting is an English parliamentarian. Will your man be there? By man, I presume she meant Charles. I blushed out, recalling what he had told me at the seal. She shook my head. She stared at us, as if trying to survey whether we could be trusted with what she was about to say next. Then, making her mind, she said, I have a feeling that this meeting will decide our future, especially for the Muslims. It may be that the man from London has been brought in to strike a deal with the Hindus and create a rift among us. I have to find out what will be talked about. She looked at us pointedly. I do not understand English. If you want, you can come with me and help me find out. I know that you are up to something. You want to save the hotel. I understand that it will help you to know what is going on and use it to save the hotel. I gain from this, but so do you. I looked at a friend to see what she made of Begum Jan proposition. And how do you suggest we spy on a high level confidential meeting? Afrin asked. By going there, I want to go myself and you come with me. She made it sound so simple. Surely this was crossing a line. Surely this was the most dangerous ask out of all that we had done so far. Surely we could not participate in this madness. Yet Afrin nodded. Perhaps I needed not to go to America after all, as there were no dearth of drama right here in Simla. We were deep in the forest training with the Shimla Circle, they taught us how to shoot with revolvers and rifles, to aim with precision and keep our arms steady, to take cover and to make way of firing. We learned how to handle the heavier guns but did not practice with them. It was a wartime and we had to save our ammunition for the final day. Even the Germans had stopped smuggling guns into India, we were told. At first, I could not believe that my sister and I would be allowed to hold guns, but we have never had any professional training. I had protested weakly. Ajat Bhai had laughed. Girl, I have trained hundreds of people in the Bhagat Fauj to use guns. They are also not professionals. They are common people just like you and I, with many women among them. If they can learn, so you can. On the evening of the ball, Guruji said, I have to be among the guests and lead the Viceroys away smoothly and without suspicion on my own. I will be there to get you four out with our men before it's found that the Viceroys is missing. We had not told the Simla Circle anything about Lady Sinclair or our intention to break into the meeting. We needed to hold these cards close to our chest until we were sure of what they meant. And how should we have you at the ball? Noor asked spectacly. There would be no Indians. It would be odd if you were suddenly the Indian present at the ball, an unknown name and face. They would immediately be suspicious. Perhaps the vices might not even be allowed inside if you're there. Well, maybe I have to be disguised as a servant then. You will introduce me the other servant before, and I will be given easier duties. I am afraid pouring the British drinks is a job responsibility I have never had before. Noor Afrin and I looked at each other. Having Guruji there among the servants, there too on the day of the ball, would not be an easy feat. The other servant would immediately wonder and talk about why we would bring a new man in on such an important day. It's very important, said Ratan Babu, that appearance be kept and managed down to the miniest detail. At the slightest doubt, it will be game over for us. They may not be expecting it, but the British are very good at spotting something amiss, and somehow the bastard always get lucky. Afrin was positive that the Lord would favor us, that he would not abandon us in our quest to win India her freedom. All we had to do was take the first step. They are very good, Guruji, so we just have to be better. Your job here slowly is to get the vices to take the bunkers on the pretext of the opium. We will handle the rest. The Simla Circle has been planning this his death for years. Then the three of you will follow me and Ratan Babu through the servants' passage and to soothe in the forest. He will take us from there and we'll have your passport and guide you through the hills. Soothe, in turns, he smiled and reassurance. I will be waiting for you all. And what if we can't make it? That won't happen. Later, when I was practicing, Soothe came up to me. I was conscious of his presence, unable to get my aim. He stopped closer and asked me if he may help me set the gun right. I nodded and he put his arms around the rifle. I could hear his even breaths. He turned and looked right at me, gave a smile, and without aiming shot, it was perfect, and I gasped in surprise. How did you come into the Simla Circle, Mr. Sood? A pause followed my question. Years ago, a group of traders come here, eager to meet the requirements of the New English settlers. My father was a loyal servant to them, and his shop was meeting their needs. But I want to live in a free land. Nalini, I want to be rich and powerful and strong on my own terms. I nodded, impressed by his ambitions. And I hear from your sister that you sometimes mention wanting to be in the talkative. Why is that? It's not a profession for good women. Say, I said, looking around for me, who was always rather impatient with the topic. Now, when Sud asked me, it felt as if it had been so long since I had allowed myself to dream of the possibility of the talkies. Talkies. I always wanted to enjoy the life different people lead while still being me. I want to know and see and feel how it is to be washerwoman down by the river, a princess with 1,000 men at her feet, a wife widowed as soon as she was married, a mother who would die for her children. It's hard to be all these people in one life, but when one is acting, one can, even for some moments, be anything. Is not that a liberating idea? He stared at me intensely, and I almost had to look away. Maybe that's liberation, or perhaps escape. Are you trying to run away from who you actually are, Miss Mystery, or who you have to be? Sometimes we are afraid to face ourselves, so we run away, always in search of something else. I felt quite offended at his insinuation, and it clearly showed on my face, for he laughed. Don't take me too seriously like you. I too plan to live many lives in this one life. If things go right, perhaps our path will cross again and we can do it together. He walked away with a smile. It was almost offensive what he said. How uncouth of him to suggest to a young unmarried woman that she could live many lives with him. I could complain to Ratan Babu about Su's manner of speaking, but I did not want him to think the fighting arena was unsuitable for me. For the first time, my blood ran hot as fast. It was starting to dawn on me that what we were about to do would have far reaching consequences. I closed my left eye, aimed at the point marked on the tree trunk, imagining a faceless head there, a head that represented all that came between us and the light I sought, and the others who had just joined me by then beamed at my aim. I grinned at my gun, now holding it with respect. Chapter 16. More than 18 years ago, when Shimla was coming to life as the summer capital of the British Indian government, an enterprising businessman for France decided to build a child at the back of Summer Hill. But his dream project faced protests from the Hill tribe that still lived in the surroundings. Their chieftain had been buried at the site and they refused to give up the land, no matter how much the British consulted them. The tribesmen and women tied themselves to the ground, willing to die to protect their chieftain resting place. Some of them did die until a clever Englishman negotiated a compromise. The childhood would be built, but the chieftain's resting place would stay in the garden. Every Tuesday, a sadhu from the tribe would come into every room while holding incense, a lemon, and green chilies to ward off evil spirits. The second part was non-negotiable. If the child were to be built without more bloodshed, the sadhu had to be allowed entry every Tuesday so the spirits may remain at rest. The child was built, and over time the Frenchmen left. Then the British took over the house, turning it into the residence of the commander-in-chief aside. By the point, it was even harder to get rid of the superstitious word I had spread that if the sadhu missed his weekly cleansing of the house, the whole town would be cursed and the mountains would send rocks hurtling down, destroying every human and house that stood on the land. The sadhu was annoying but necessary, and nobody wanted to upset the order of things, so the ritual continued. Accordingly, every Tuesday, like clockwork, sadhu would go around the chalet several times, chanting mantras. The smoke and the smell of burning chilies making people tear up. So, when he arrived in the afternoon, all the doors and windows in the chalet were thrown open. When Begum Jan put her informants on the trail of the mysterious new arrival from London, eventually they found out about a meeting that only 3 people were invited to. The meeting would be held at Lord Beeson's residence, the chalet, and not the Viceroy's office. As luck would have it, this meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday, presenting our one and only hope to listen it thanks to the sadhu. The meeting was 2 hours after the sadhu's cleansing, so we had no choice but to take the opportunity to gain entry into the house and wait it out. It came down to Afreen and I to set up. Me because I was the smallest and the most agile, and Afreen because I could not be left alone. Noor and Begum Jan would help us exit, throwing a rope so we could climb over the 6 feet high fence surrounding the chart grounds. Don't be impatient, Noor said tensely, tucking the ends of my sari into my petticoat, and tie your hair tightly for the love of God. The next thing you know, you have knocked down. Something had blown your cover. She pulled us both down to the ground, holding our hand, squeezing them. Act smart, listen carefully, and treat the caution. You two always beat me at hide and seek while I search for hours. Tap into those skills, do your best, and don't get caught. But no matter what, I promise I will bail you out. A friend told her not to worry, and I nodded with determination, praying to God that my thumping heart would not give us away. I had been worried that getting inside the house would be the hard part, that one of the servants would see us as we snagged past the garden and in through the front doors, but this was the easiest, as everybody unsuspectingly just went about their business and let the sadhu come in and do his job. Entering the house and then hiding behind the large corner sideboard in the drawing room was relatively easy, but it was not so easy staying up put. Afreen and I held hands as we sat on the floor, which was adorned by an executive Persian carpet. At first, the sound of footsteps pushed my heart into my mouth. But as I got used to the servants roaming around about near us, without any knowledge that Afreen and I were crouched only some feet away from them, I began to relax, even getting bored. It was a good thing Lord Beeson was not married. It would have been much harder to sneak around his house under the watchful eye of a wife. The servants were sweeping the floor and dusting, putting the house in the order before Beeson returned with the others from for the meeting. I heard one of them hum an old Pahadi song as she went about cleaning, and another man yelled out to her to stop wasting time. Then the room was quiet, but I could still hear the hustle and the bustle outside. The dining room is getting set up, Afreen whispered. We overheard that the study needed to be prepared as the meeting would happen there, so we knew we needed to be somehow start moving. I was stiff from the couch, crouching in the same spot for what seemed like more than an hour. It seemed quieter outside now. Was the time to sneak into the study before they started to prepare from Basin's arrival. Afreen and I gave up each other one the last squeeze and crawled behind the sofa, trying to chart out the route to study. After getting out of the drawing room, we would not need to cross a gallery and then walk to the study, open the door, and find a spot to hide inside. The biggest problem was walking past the kitchen, which, although set on the opposite side of the gallery, was full of the servants. Let's just rush through. There is no other way, Afreen said, and I murmured a small prayer and started crawling towards the gallery. So far, it was quiet, and once in the gallery, we got up and walked quickly but silently through it. We have to run fast, Afreen said, grabbing my hand and pulling me forward. We would have just made it if my elbow had not knocked against the shelf it dreaded, and with the resounding crash, a vessel fell to the ground almost as if Noor's warning made it happen. I almost cursed out loud, but both of us managed to get the is- inside the study and close the door behind us, standing against it, not daring to move. We heard footsteps approach where the vase had fallen, just a door between us. I prayed to God when they would not come into the study, and we got lucky once again. Must be that accused cat. Somebody shouted. My heart only slowed down when the footsteps faded away. We searched for a hiding place, knowing we didn't have long. The room had a meeting table in the center and bookshelves across two of the walls. There was a desk by the window next to an umbrella stand, and that was pretty much all. I looked at a friend, both of us blank about where we could hide. This had to be the most unfurnished study in all of Shimla. The only possibility was to go up to the stairs to the loft where there were a few more bookshelves and another sofa. We hurried towards the loft, going up the flimsy wooden stairs. We would have to push the sofa forward and crouched behind it, hoping that Bison would not notice it lying slightly more ahead than usual. Lifting the sofa from each end to avoid making any noise, I asked Afrin to first hide at the back as I inspected the room from different angles, trying to see if anything looked out of place. I tried not to think about the possibility of being found. There was no excuse in the world that could justify us being there, and being caught would be a good enough reason to be hanged. We crouched there for what seemed like hours before the doors finally opened. I could judge by the weight of the footsteps that a servant had hurried in. A few minutes later, I heard more voices. We sent the viceroys and their guest had arrived. My palms started sweating. My breathing got faster, and I focused on calming myself. The reality of what we were doing dawned on me. How foolish and reckless it was. How very uncaring of life itself. Afrin joined her hands, keeping one on top of the other, and gave me a reassuring smile. Ekla chalo re, she whispered to me. What's that? She leaned even closer to me, her voice barely louder than my beating heart. The Tagore song, it means keep going, even no one is with you. No matter how difficult the path is. Even if people leave your side, you just stay determined and strong. You might think like your word has come to an end, but if you just keep going forward in your heart, even on your you can do anything you want. She had always been the brave one, and when I saw her face, fearless and determined in the face of absolute odds as we flinted ourselves against the wall, when I saw her staring her eyes fiercely, ready to battle a whole empire, I felt ready too. She flicked my nose with her finger, giving me another squeeze of encouragement, and I nodded, feeling braver than before. We sat in absolute silence, tempering our own breathing into the sound of nothingness, and after what seemed like an eternity, the door opened and we heard the stressed movements of two more servants setting the room in order, perhaps placing tea and water. Before hurrying out, we could see nothing, but our position in the room allowed us to hear everything. The downside being that they would also be able to hear any movement we made. Yet the movement in its entirety was surreal. Lord Beeson, the Viceroy, and the parliamentarian from London were sitting just a few feet away from us for a confidential meeting. Afrin and I sat next to each other, flat against the bookshelf, the back of the sofa in front of us. They made small talk for a few minutes. The man from London, whose name was soon learned to be Lord Hastings, talked about the chaos back home, how the war was taking its toll, that nothing functioned as it did before, that everything was so expensive, the economy was faltering, there were men on the streets desperate for jobs, and the German advance was moving it at an unimaginable speed. He complained about the Americans, the Russians, the French, and the Irish. Both Afrin and I listened with deliberation. So this is how heads of empire talked about themselves, how they spent their days. Funny enough, it did not sound that different from Noor discussing the hotels running from the day with us all. Coming to the Roses, Lord Hastings, the viceroy interrupted. Lord Hastings paused and then replied, now that I have seen the town for myself, I am happy to offer the Prime Minister's assent for the operation. There were some explanation and signs, and Afrin and I looked at each other excitedly. This was clearly what the meeting was about. Was for, but what operation and what roses? Afrin and I held hands, knowing we were getting closer. But first, Lord Hastings said, Bison, you report. We heard some shuffling of papers and a chair moving back. I am quite happy to report that my agent was able to put into effect the forces needed for the affair. We suffered minimum damage. Our offices functioned mostly normally, and the impact was high. Residence has lowered in the city. A breakdown of law and order seen as a much larger threat. The natives are afraid of going for political rallies or protest any kind of crowded meeting scenes for fear of infighting between the different communities. All in all, the operation was implemented successfully in Simla, and the model can be used in other major cities to be curb malicious actions. You have an Indian agent, Lord Hastings asked. Is he trustworthy? Certainly, we need not just ours but also their eyes on the ground. Besides, as he is so fond of saying, here, 1 and 1 make 11, ek aur ek 11, my heart drummed against my chest, and I was afraid that in every pause they held to take in breath, they would hear us and excuse us on the spot. Do not mistake Simla with other cities, the viceroy said with impatience. Simla is not like Lahore or Lucknow or Bombay. But, sir, the other cities provide even better conditions for our operation, Beeson said. Simla had been quite docile, essential abilities developing, and even here we could manage. Imagine the other cities where there so many more Muslims and Hindu living together. Imagine the potential there. I could not be misinterpret the greed in his voice. One thing I knew for sure now, our hunch had been correct. Something wicked was brewing. The Prime Minister, in any case, has given his assent when the time is right, Lord Hastings said. It appears to be the best possible course of action in the present circumstances. Civil arrest will help tighten up our control over India and provide the perfect justification to ensure the extension of our realm. The war and the winters that come along with it will be long, hard, and cold. We need supplies and men. We cannot give up the subcontinent if we don't want to lose our place in the world. I could not agree more, sir, added Bison. Again, a silence followed, and the viceroy asked, Proposed time? I would suggest November. When it is start to get cold, we have an advantage. We are used to fighting in winters, said Bison. There was a sound of sheet of paper being spread out on the desk, and I assumed it to be a map. The civil war needs to be hit all cities at the same time, in the north, south, east, and west. A standing army will be called to monitor the situation. In the moment of crisis, it will be much easier to get the necessary act passed. Has it been formulated? The Accession of India Act, owing to civil unrest and the general instability in the world due to the war, Britain takes full charge of the subcontinent indefinitely. India remains under direct control of the crown, and all political organizations demanding to contest elections are to be banned. In the interest of the minority communities, the India Congress won't swallow it easily, said the viceroy. We will have to manage that. I was dying to talk to Afrin about what we had just heard. What did all this mean? The sound of scribbling pen against paper went on for a few minutes, and finally they shook hands to end the meeting. They moved on to talk about Simla season and how Hastings could use his time to acquaint himself with Simla society. We heard the documents being filled away, and then they got up, leaving the room. But just when we thought the meeting was over and Afrin and I were about to ease up and find a way out, the doors were thrown open again, and this time even more people entered the room, offering greetings. We attempted to make ourselves even smaller but felt tired and stuck. How long would these people stay here? What if some of them moved to the sofa on the upper floor? The thought of all these men finding out we had been spying on them made me freeze in terror. And then I heard his voice loud and clear, full of energy and spirit. Paulinets, that was infectious, yet deep and reassuring. One should not be so quick to ride Simla away, Charles was saying. It has its own charms, some that you can definitely not find in England. You, Nyler, have certainly chanced upon these our charms, haven't you? Somebody commented. I would not deny it, Charles replied cheerfully. Is it your intent to marry her then? I would hope for it, if she would have me. Of course, I suppose I will soon have to ask her. Somebody interrupted the conversation and my heart sank, replacing all my earlier thoughts. So Charles was going to marry Eliza May. I imagined them as a couple and knew that they complemented each other in every way. Tall, handsome, successful, and most importantly, English. They would attend parties and balls together, dividing their time between India and England, have beautiful children, and gain an important position in society. From the moment I had met him, I had known it would end up like this. After all, I could not expect him to give up his life just because we could not be together. I may have dedicated my life to my fight for freedom, but he still had his own to live it out. To get married, raise children, grow old, and die a happy man. For who was he to me? And who was I to him? This thought so overtook my mind that I barely even noticed that the group below had finally left the room. Afrin gave me a look of terror that baffled me until I too heard footsteps getting closer and the feeling of somebody nearby. Don't worry, I'll get it. Must be right upstairs. I realized with a jolt that Charles was coming to where we were hiding. Before I could even think about, let alone plan out a reaction, his arm bent over our heads, going through the shelves behind us. For a moment, it seemed he had not noticed it, but when he leaned forward to take a book, he got a glimpse. A Startled, the book he held fell with a clatter, and the world came crashing around me. Time seemed to stop, and in that heartbeat there was only Charles, shocked to his core, staring down at us. Afrin, who was so baffled by the turn of events that her mouth hung wide open, frozen eye from our low position, extended a hand towards him, my fear turning into a look of pleading. Something wrong, Nyler? A voice called out, footsteps approaching. He stared at me, still amazed, as I kept a finger on my mouth, begging him not to react to save us. Afrin folded her hands and mirrored my own expression. I could hardly tell what Charles made of the two of us hiding behind the sofa, the last place in the world where we should be. His shock turned to confusion, and he was too nonplussed to make any further move until he realized the other person was right behind him. No, I thought I saw a monkey outside the window. The other man asked Charles if he was coming down, and that shook him out of his revive. For he murmured a yes and gave us one last look. He walked away slowly, perhaps wondering if we were going to leave, and if so, how. Relief set in, just in another fair envelope in inside. Charles knew he had had the grace to give us a chance, but I knew that he had only let us to be for the moment. We did not have time to develop on this. However, once the servants came in to clean the room, they would also approach the bookshelves to set them right. We had to get out before they saw us too, and decided to climb out the window. Being seen on the grounds was still less risky than lurking in the office where a confidential meeting had just happened. Getting out was easier than coming in had been. Once we got over the fence, which involved laborious pulls from Begum Jan, who was determined to show us her strength, Noor assaulted us with the kisses. Charles, no, I said once we got away from the child. Noor's eyes grew up as round as the palms growing on the trees around us. Tell me you are joking. He saw us hiding but decided not to reveal us at the moment. But he knows, and I know him. He will not let this go. He will come back and demand answer. And if he is not satisfied, he will have us arrested. I realized I was shaking. Afrin told them all we had heard him. And in that act of narration, all the different pieces of the riddle fell into place. Noor stopped under a tree, exhausted. The British will incite a civil war, Afrin whispered. Yet we heard her perfectly. A civil war between the Hindus and Muslims, just like they managed to make the Hindus and Muslims fight each other in the recent riots. That was their experiment, and it worked beautifully. And so now they hope to replicate it on a much larger scale in several cities at once. Once there is a civil war, they will make the army move in, impose draconian control over the provinces. But I try to find a way out from this horror. They would be lose the army, the offices will have to close, the country will shut down. Any short term loss will be easily offset by their long term gains, Begamjan said. Besides, Afrin said, you heard Bisan, the experiment in Simla worked because he has an Indian agent who did all their dirty work. He already has some people on his side who want this strife. I could barely believe it. Who among us would pit his own be written against on one another? So the British mastermind the riots, Noor said with a disgust. Not only they did not stop it, they were also the reason it started. And the roses. What was all about that? Nobody said anything as we talked until Noor grabbed my arm, stopping dead in her tracks. Of course, the roses. They man the war of the roses. The two great houses in England who fought a civil war for years, seeking control until the Tudors, who were not even the warning houses, ascended the throne. This conformist, the British want the Hindus and the Muslim to fight one another for an easy rule, an easy seat on the throne. There was no time, however, to sit and discuss at length what we had just uncovered. Charles was already waiting for me outside the hotel. सो गाइस, मिलते हैं आपसे नेक्स्ट वीडियो में. बहुत ही बड़ा क्लाइमेक्स आ गया है. अब तो चार्ल्स को भी पता चल गया है, तो देखते हैं कि अगले वीडियो में क्या होगा और अब ये कैसे रोक पाएगी नलिनी, उसको क्या बताएगी या क्या कोई रीज़न देगी कि वो किस लिए वहाँ पे छुपी थी. तो ये सब तो आपको अगले वीडियो में पता चलेगा. तब तक के लिए बने रहे मेरे चैनल पे और डोंट फॉरगेट टू लाइक एंड सब्सक्राइब एंड कमेंट योर फेवरेट बुक. नेक्स्ट वीडियो उस पर ही होगी, आई प्रॉमिस. थैंक्स फॉर वॉचिंग. बाय बाय.